Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and a tabletop role-playing aficionado. In this video, I'm going to analyze and rank all 8 new subclasses from the supplement book D&D Forgotten Realms, Heroes of Faerun, and I'm going to do it via Roll20.net. If you enjoy these videos and watching fun weekly live plays and other D&D content, you can support me via patreon.com/roguewatson. You can also support this channel by shopping for your tabletop games, CCGs, miniatures, RPG, book supplies, and more at our sponsor, Noble Knight Games, using my affiliate link. So, Forgotten Realms, Heroes of Faerun, released alongside the Adventures of Faerun, which I covered previously. And for the purposes of this supplement, I'm solely looking at the subclasses. There is more, of course, to this book. It adds new backgrounds and some feats and some information about the Forgotten Realms, as if we needed any. I'm going to try not to be too snarky about it, because I just think that when 5.5 first came out and they were like, hey, we're going to do Greyhawk for the Dungeon Master's Guide, and we were all kind of excited, like, oh, maybe we're not going to do Forgotten Realms so much as the de facto setting. But then they kind of did this big two-part release where one was very DM focused with new adventures, which again I've previously covered, ranking my adventures from that one, and now this one is of course the player focused supplement, which has a lot of new player options, including new subclasses, but not one for each new class, weirdly. So sorry for barbarian, druid, monk, and warlock fans, you got nothing. In terms of subclasses. Instead, we only have 8 of the character classes get new subclasses. But I thought it'd be fun, after analyzing and looking through them, that I would rank them from what I think is the most interesting and most exciting new subclass to what I think is the weakest new addition. And for my ranking, it's just, a combination of how I feel the mechanics work. Does it feel like it's decently balanced? Does it feel fun compared to the ones that already came out in the 5.5? Because I'm purely, by the way, looking, because this is a 2024 supplement, right? So I'm purely looking at just that new book and not everything that necessarily came before. So the Player's Handbook, if you recall, had 4 new subclasses for every class. So how does it compare to all of those? Also, how good is the theme? Like, does the theme reflect Forgotten Realms, and does it reflect its own theme that it tries to create, or is it just kind of a hodgepodge of abilities? And then just kind of the vibes I get from the general subclass. So all of that to be said, let's go through my order, of course, going from bottom to top. So what do I think is the weakest, the number 8 subclass? And for me, even though I think this class is very, very strong, I do think it's going to be the Cleric Knowledge Domain. Knowledge may be power, but D&D is still a turn-based tactical combat game at its heart. And to create a subclass based around like divination and those very, very niche, rarely used spells is always going to be tricky, especially because the divination wizard is surprisingly really amazing, as anybody who's probably played with or has been a wizard and has gone divination, because the portent die is so damn good. So we already have like a divination themed class, but this one is specifically if you want to worship like a god of knowledge, for example, Ogma, then the knowledge domain is there. I believe also that the knowledge domain was available in the 2014 cleric book. I didn't actually go back and check, so I'm sure somebody can correct me on that. But because they wanted to keep things symmetrical, everybody only got 4 subclasses, so I think that one might have been dropped from 2024, so we're almost kind of re-adding it in, which is also kind of lame and not terribly exciting. The spell list that you get because each cleric subclass comes with its own spell list, again, not very exciting. You get a lot of, yes, these spells can be very useful. Probably Detect Magic, Dispel Magic are both actually pretty damn useful for those kind of abilities. I think Command is a wonderful first level spell. Actually, Detect Thoughts can be fun to use. I don't think Identify comes into play that often, or Arcane Eye. Banishment can be really helpful in certain situations. So, but the Mind Magic feature I was not very impressed with, if I understood it correctly. So the big feature at level 3, as a magic action, you can use one of your channel divinities, and you can basically cast a spell for free, but the spell has to be from the divination school on your domain's table. So those are 2 narrow focuses. So only from this table, and only the divination school spells, which are given the little asterisk here, which is not a whole lot. And also, a lot of these spells already have the ritual tag, which means you can spend 10 minutes to cast them and not use a spell slot. So the only time this really comes into play is if you need to somehow cast one of these spells in combat. So you need to use a spell slot, and then, hey, I could use Channel Divinity instead of casting a spell slot to cast Detect Magic or something. Or you could cast something like, I guess, Mind Spike might be actually a pretty... That's a decent kind of Dissonant Whispers style spell, I guess. It does damage. Detect Thoughts, I guess you can't ritual that one. That one could be useful. But it's very, very limited to me. It's just not very exciting. Like, the spell list isn't very exciting. You do get 2 more proficiencies, I guess, which is nice. Okay, actually, you know what? I didn't read that part. You have Expertise. So you're super skill, which, okay, that's nice. And I mean, the Cleric is already a good class. So I guess if you just want to stack a bunch of skills, that's fine. I actually missed the Expertise part, but you know what? I'm still going to rank it on my bottom because I just didn't think that was very exciting. Unfettered Mind gives you telepathy out to 60 feet, which you can do a group chat with. That's fine. Also, I feel like there's just spells that can do that. Magic items that can do that. The low-level Warlock, who's the Great Old One, I believe, can do that. Although I think it's a 1-to-1 and necessarily a group chat. That is very useful to have telepathy, and especially during maybe some kind of heist situations where that comes into play. Also, proficiency in intelligence saves. Fine. I don't think intelligence actually comes up very often. I think it's almost always wisdom when it comes to mental saves. So that's okay. And then the level 17 feature is that basically once per long rest, you gain advantage on all of your D20 tests for an hour. You just super buff. That's just a super generic buff. I mean, that's basically giving yourself like, what, a +5 on everything you do, which is attack rolls, saving throws, initiative, ability checks, just everything except you casting a spell that requires a saving throw for the enemy, I guess. So, fine. I just wasn't terribly excited with any of this. Again, if I want to play a knowledge-based spellcaster, I'm going to be a divination wizard every time. So, and it also just feels like this is kind of perfunctory, like, oh, we kind of need this kind of cleric in here. And I also didn't think any of the abilities were necessarily just exciting enough to warrant taking this over any of their clerics. So, for me, it's going to have to be ranked on the bottom. Sorry, cleric. For number 7, we're going to go with another of the divine powered spellcaster guys, sort of, and that's the Paladin, Oath of the Noble Genies. So I believe we got like a genie-themed subclass for Warlocks in 2014 in one of the extra supplement books. So I was surprised to see that go to the Paladin here. The theme here is you're tied to obviously like the elemental planes, and they kind of make the excuse of like, oh well, Kalimshan could be, you know, the place where it's kind of the classic like Arabian Nights place that's got all the genies and everything that has ties to elements. Fine, that's okay. It's interesting that you don't have to choose one of. I feel like the elements, like having it be just elements in general, is kind of a weird theme versus having you pick one of the 4. I think would be the more interesting option, and then your abilities would change. Kind of like, I don't know, like the totem barbarian had you pick some, like there's other subclasses where you pick the subclass and then you pick like the specialty within that subclass. And I feel like that's kind of what they should have done here. Instead, you just get all 4 options. So you just kind of have all the elements raging in you, I guess. In this case, your level 3 ability is Elemental Smite, where it only triggers after you Divine Smite. So it basically modifies your Divine Smite to do an extra thing, but you also have to expend your Channel Divinity to do it. So you're really spending a lot of resources for this one move. Although I think the new Paladins get free Divine Smites, I believe, in 2024. So they include like forcing a save to grapple somebody with earth, or doing extra fire damage, or like teleporting around and entering like the blur spell, basically. They're all really good effects, but they only go off when you're divine smiting and when you spend channel divinity. So it's kind of a huge, like, you're pulling the nitrous on that one. The spells are pretty good though. You do get a pretty good spell list, lots of crazy elemental spells, although it feels like you're very much like going with the air theme, because you've got like Phantasmal Force, Fly, Gaseous Form, Thunderous Smite. All of these feel like they're just like the air element. And again, I feel like it would have made more sense to just let me choose which of the 4 and then go hard with that theme versus just like genies in general, I guess. I don't know. Also, you get unarmored defense, which is bizarre for a paladin. I really don't like this. If all the of all the classes, the one that I feel is most synonymous with wearing big bulky armor is a damn paladin, like the chivalrous noble knight character. Like obviously, yeah, fighter can be armored up, clerics are almost always armored up, and for a paladin subclass to specifically be like, oh, I've got unarmored defense with Dex plus Con, which is probably not better than what, because we don't need a big amount of dexterity for a paladin with heavy armor. It just seems weird. It seems weird. I don't think that's thematically. I have a problem with it, and then balance wise, it doesn't seem like it's efficient to go with unarmored defense as a as a paladin. You also gain extra skill proficiency. They like giving us extra skills. The level 7 ability lets us actually get damage resistance of an element when we're using our aura protection, which again is our always on emanation in 10 feet, which adds to our allies' saving throws. That's actually pretty cool. And the fact that at the start of each turn we can actually change that to something else. Very amazing. Like aura protection is already really good, and to add on to that with just with a whole extra one is fantastic. But again, the theme of just having all the elements within you seems weird to me. Like I feel like it would just be more interesting creatively to actually restrict players to choosing one of the 4, and then that's the one where you get the resistance, that's the one where you get all your abilities coming out. I feel like that would have been cooler, because I feel like that's how the elemental planes work. Like it's very much you stick to one and that's your whole thing, versus just having power over all of them. Level 15 gives you basically a reaction that's a combination of absorb elements and hellish rebuke, which is great. It also doesn't cost any of your other resources. It's its own resource. You can just use a number of times equal to your charisma modifier per long rest. So that's pretty awesome. Also, whenever you are taking that damage, you can then choose a different damage to deal to the target. And then level 20 gives you a really super crazy Super Saiyan mode. You just turn on this incredible super buff where you just can fly for 60 feet and hover. And then when anybody is in your aura of protection fails a d20 test, you can take a reaction and make that ally succeed. Literally legendary resistance. And it doesn't, that part doesn't cost anything, although the whole thing costs once per long rest. But what's funny is if you're flying around, then they're probably no longer in your aura of protection so much. You're like, oh man, you've got this super awesome aura. You're like, yeah, I do. Now I'm going to fly away and go fight the bad guys. Like, oh, okay. So yeah, I think I had my main problem with it is I think they should have done stick to using one of the 4 and then going with that theme versus trying to do all the elements in one. Not that it makes it too powerful or anything. It's just kind of just weird to me thematically, and the whole unarmored defense thing. Just I can't picture that with a paladin. So I wasn't too terribly impressed with this one, even though it was fairly original compared to some of the others where I hadn't seen like a paladin with, I guess, elemental abilities specifically. But for me, it's my number 7 is the Oath of the Noble Genies. Number 6, this one might upset quite a few of you actually, is actually going to be the Wizard Blade Singer. I know that a lot of you are big fans, and this is a very kind of famous subclass kit from older editions of D&D. In fact, I'm pretty sure whenever I played Baldur's Gate 2, I probably used a Blade Singer. I think everybody probably used a Blade Singer. It's just a cool idea to have like this wizard who can also like, wield like a rapier or something. And it was neat thematically. And here, they tie it to like, it's very much an elvish tradition, although, and I think only elves could be Blade Singers back in the day because they had all those restrictions. Now, of course, that we don't have any of those restrictions anymore. But I also think it's just less interesting in 5th edition these days because everybody has magic. And it's just less of a cool thing for Blade Singers to be able to have this, because unless you're a barbarian, because there's even like fighter, or a lot of fighters and rogues have, the magic subclasses now, and just everybody can do the magic thing. So to have the magic plus martial thing is just no longer as crazy cool, I guess, as it probably was back in the day, is what I'm guessing. I don't really have a problem with it. so much. I just think there's other ones that are more interesting, for example. So the signature feature is Blade Song, where as a bonus action, you invoke this Blade Song. You can't be wearing armor, and you can't be using like a two-handed weapon or anything, or a shield, I believe. You can only use like a one-handed weapon. And it allows you to use your intelligence for attack and damage rolls, add your intelligence modifier to your AC, increase your speed by 10 feet, and gives you, oh no, it's not advantage. It's add your intelligence modifier to concentration saves to maintain, or sorry, constitution saves to maintain concentration on spells, which if you're going into combat melee, maybe don't cast those concentration spells, perhaps. So it's nice, but you do have to use this finite resource to turn it on, just so you can go into melee, and you're a full-blooded wizard who would probably be better served by not doing that. So it always felt weird from a balance standpoint, I guess. But I'm somebody who really likes these kind of builds, by the way. I always like building those crazy, like, what are they called? Gish or something, like where you combine like the melee and the magic abilities, and you get to have like the best of both worlds, but really you're kind of, you know, limiting yourself on one or the other to be able to do both those things. So I do like these builds, and I feel for the Blade Singer, and I think it's a neat idea. But you do have to turn on this finite resource that you can invoke a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier per long rest, which is probably going to be 3 or 4 times, which should be enough for you to do it in all the battles you want to do it. You also regain a use when you use Arcane Recovery. So that gives you like one more use of it whenever you basically short rest. You gain proficiency with martial weapons, which you basically need as a wizard because you wouldn't have any. You can use a weapon as a spellcasting focus. You gain extra attack at level 6. Normally all the martials are going to get at level 5, so that actually helps you kind of be viable as a melee attacker. Also, you can replace one of them with one of your attacks with a wizard cantrip, which is pretty fun. That really makes me feel like I'm playing that Skyrim build where I've got like the one-handed weapon and then the magic in the other, which I've totally done. And that's a lot of fun. The Eldritch Knight, by the way, I believe can do that at level... can also replace one of the attacks, I think. I'm trying to remember what level you can do it. I know that they gain the level 14 ability that the Blade Singer gets at level 7. Level 14 ability is after you cast a spell that's a casting time of an action, you make one attack with a weapon as a bonus action. The Eldritch Knight has it as the opposite, I believe. It's like whenever they attack, they can cast a spell or something. I forget exactly the wording of it. So we already have the fighter who has the wizard subclass. Now this is the wizard with the fighter subclass, which does feel a little bit weird. They do have separate abilities, though, because the fighter can, you know, summon the weapon and can't be disarmed or anything, whereas the wizard has to actually invoke this entire ability to even become a viable melee combatant, but they do seem to get enough uses of it. The Song of Defense is an interesting one. I don't know how much I would actually use that. When you take damage, you can use a reaction to expend a spell slot and reduce the damage taken by an amount equal to 5 times the spell slot's level. I think you'd always want to use shield first. If you can expend a first level spell slot to gain plus 5 AC and just not get hit in general, you're still using shield. But I guess if something were going to hit you, then I don't know. I'd still rather have the spell slots. The only reason I guess you would use this is if it was literally going to kill you. If it was going to take you down to 0 hit points, then you could expend a level 1 spell slot to just make sure you maintain 5 hit points or something. I guess that would probably be useful. And I guess also if you're a wizard and you're getting a lot of long rests and you're higher level, then you've got more spell slots to spare. So maybe you would use that. So it's and level 10 is probably around the time you would be like, yeah, I'll throw a 1 or 2 level spell slot to reduce that damage amount. So fine. So I think it's fine. I just think there's more classes that are a little bit more interesting than this. I'm glad that we saw it. I think Blade Singer makes a lot of people happy that they can play one. Again, we kind of already had Eldritch Knight, and I just think a lot of classes already do this thing where it's like, let's combine the martial and the spell casting. But I would be interested to see how this one works, but through playing it and see how good it feels to be the like wizard fighter, because with blade work, with you using your intelligence modifier, you're probably up there attack damage wise with a fighter, although you're not using a two-handed weapon, so you're kind of just the one-handed sword and board, but without the AC of the shield. But you do have the AC of your intelligence modifier, which helps. You're obviously using mage armor, so you've probably got decent AC. Shield lets you really actually be a pretty good tank. And you've got extra attack at level 6, which means you're almost right there with them. The main problem is you still have your squishy wizard hit points, and that does kind of give you a slight problem. Also, if you're up there getting hit possibly more often, you're not going to be able to use those concentration spells quite as often, even though, yeah, you get to add your intelligence modifier. I'd almost rather just have constitution save proficiencies or advantage or something versus the intelligence modifier, but yeah, anything will help with that. So Wizard Bladesinger is my number 6, and honestly, it's pretty much the same as my level 5, which is the Spellfire Sorcerer. This one, I really didn't understand the theme because it feels like the theme is just default sorcerer. In fact, reading through it, I was like, oh, this should have been in the player's handbook, because like a lot of the classes have like their, like the rogue goes thief, or the fighter goes to champion, like the barbarian goes to berserker, where it's like, I just want to keep doing my basic stuff. I don't want to have any extra theming or anything crazy with my subclass. That's really what this one feels like. It feels like it's just the default. And I look back and like, oh yeah, the other sorcerer options are like, draconic, wild magic, aberrant, and I can't remember. Wild Magic? Did I say that one? But anyway, none of them necessarily felt like the default sorcerer necessarily. This one, especially after reading this one very much is. So the theme isn't very exciting on this one. So the abilities, to go over it, this is the Sorcerer Spellfire, if I didn't say that, by the way. Level 3, whenever you spend a sorcerer point, which is through either using your meta magic or converting your slots into sorcery points or whatever, back and forth, you or an ally gains temporary hit points equal to 1d4 plus your charisma modifier, which is, again, probably going to be pretty damn good. Probably 3, 4, 5. So that doesn't really scale, though. 1d4 plus charisma. I mean, that's like false life, casting false life on you or your allies. Also, temporary hit points don't stack. Or you can just deal damage to somebody. 1d4 fire or radiant damage. That's all very, very tiny and pithy amount. Now, granted, it's just an extra effect on top of a thing you're going to be doing constantly anyway. So you have to think of it in terms of that kind of balance, where it's like, oh, but I'm using sorcery points probably not quite. Which basically almost every time I cast a spell slot, not necessarily when I'm throwing out cantrips or anything, but when I'm casting a spell slot thing, I'm probably using a sorcery point. So then it is nice to be able to throw around those little bit of features. I assume the temporary hit points is going to be better than just dealing a little bit of fire or radiant damage. It does have to be within 30 feet, but you should be within 30 feet of allies. Maybe probably not enemies. That's why the Bolstering Flame is probably more useful. But it's still a very tiny amount, and it's a shame that it doesn't really scale very well. The spells that you get are a lot of cleric spells, surprisingly. Cure Wounds, Guiding Bolt, Lesser Restoration. These are all Aura Vitality to spell magic, and then a bunch of fire spells that you're probably already going to have as a sorcerer, but hey, at least these are always prepared, so that's a thing. The level 6 feature is actually pretty interesting. You always have Counterspell prepared, and whenever a target fails versus the Counterspell, then you actually regain sorcery points. That's fantastic, but also fuck Counterspell. Quote me on that. I hate Counterspell. I hate the idea of Counterspell. I hate its whole concept. It reminds me, I have like nightmares of playing Magic the Gathering back in the day. Of like, no, I do this and do that. Like, no. I just do. I hate Counterspell so much, and I guess that's on me. But like it, and I hate it for both when players use it and frankly when the DM uses it for just that exact reason. It just negates all the cool things that are going to happen. That being said, this is a decent feature if you're gonna be using Counterspell a lot, which fuck, I hate that. Then regaining sorcery points is actually pretty amazing. Level 14 finally upgrades your level 3 feature. By the way, whenever I look at these subclasses, I'm mainly looking at the lower level features way more than the high level, because how many of us actually make it to these higher levels? And if you look at the official, D&D 5e campaigns, they stop at like, level 12 or 13 or something. So yes, I do like looking at these high level abilities and saying, oh, that's neat. But for the most part, I'm going to be really reviewing the lower half of the abilities. So we have to wait all the way till 14 to actually get an upgrade on our signature feature, which is, again, giving out those temporary hit points or doing damage whenever we spend a sorcery point. In this case, the temporary hit points allows us to add our sorcerer level. Look at what level you get this, 14. So we went from giving out 1d4 plus probably 4 or 5. Probably at that point it's 5. So 1d4 plus 5 temp hit points, which is nice. To now, all of a sudden we're adding 1d4 plus 5 plus 14 temporary hit points. That's a big freaking deal whenever you spend a sorcery point. That's huge. So you're giving you and your teammates a damn good shield every time you do that. That's significant. Versus the damage of your Radiant Fire increases to 1d8, just doubles that damage. I would never use that compared to giving out temporary hit points of that caliber. That's crazy. It's so weird that it jumped up that far. Now, granted, you have to wait till level 14 to do it, but wow, that's actually a lot of temporary hit points. And then level 18 tends to be something they really like to do, which is giving everybody just kind of a Super Saiyan mode, which I guess that is kind of a fun thing. So you upgrade your innate sorcery, which is that new feature that sorcerers get, where they can just turn on this feature where they get a +1 to their attacks on spells and a +1 to their spell save DCs. And then you get a fly speed. Hello to the Paladin. I think there's one other one also where you turn on a thing, you get a fly speed. They like to have the level, like high level guys just flying around. You can get your Burning Life Force on, where it lets you reduce damage by using your own hit dice, and you literally basically gain the evasion ability, like the Rogue's Evasion. So incredible, of course, to get a crazy Super Saiyan mode. But for me, the theme there wasn't really a theme. It's like, oh, you're like really in tune with the weave. Like, okay, but isn't that true of like all spellcasters, I guess? It just felt like kind of the default sorcerer, and then it didn't really have a strong theme of itself. But it almost feels like this should have been included in the player's handbook, so I'm kind of knocking it for that reason. Otherwise, I don't think it's too bad. I don't obviously like Counterspell, and I think that the level 3 feature is really undercooked, and all of a sudden when you get to level 14, it's like super fucking powerful. So I thought that was a weird way of balancing that together. So that is my number 5, is the Sorcerer Spellfire. All right, we're getting to the top half now. And number 4 is going to be the Rogue Scion of the Three. If you have played Baldur's Gate 3, I think you will really like this character theming, which is themed around the Dead Three, which are these 3 dark gods of Bane, Baal, and Miracle, who of course are based around Baldur's Gate and very much are intertwined in the main plot line of Baldur's Gate 3, specifically like, was it the end of, well, Act 3 especially, and then I guess the end of either Act 1 or Act 2, I forget. I've only played that game like 2.5 times here or something. So that manifests as the rogue using the bloodied feature, which we haven't seen very often, but does exist in 2024 after not having existed in the baseline of 5th edition as an official condition. Bloodied, by the way, means when an enemy or when any target is reduced to half its hit points. So for this rogue, whenever an enemy you see within 30 feet of yourself takes damage, and that gives them now the bloodied condition, which they're reduced to half their hit points, but they're obviously not killed, you can take a reaction and teleport to them and then make a free melee attack. That's pretty fun. And that really adds to like the assassin-y vibe of you wanting to hunt down and kill people and being excited about murdering people. I think that's cool. You can only use it a number of times equal to your intelligence modifier, though. As a rogue, unless you're an arcane trickster, you probably don't have very good intelligence, let's be honest. So something to think about if you want to go with this subclass. There's at least one other feature that also uses intelligence, I believe. So you might have to not dump that stat, I guess. The Dread Allegiance. So remember I was talking about how the Paladin, maybe you should choose one of the things? Well, this one you do get to choose one of the things, which again, I'm positive about. You choose specifically one of those 3 gods, and then you gain damage resistance and a free cantrip. Actually very similar to choosing like what kind of tiefling you are, for example, which works very similarly, or like what kind of elf subclass you are, which gives you, these extra benefits. So I like that. I like having even more of a choice to make and make my character more unique even within this subclass. So that's pretty good. And, the 3 cantrips are all pretty awesome. Minor Illusion, Blade Ward, and Chill Touch. Blade Ward probably the weakest, but is better in 2024. But getting like poison resistance is huge, unless you're a dwarf, I guess. Psychic, Necrotic, those are all very useful. Level 9, you have to wait all the way to level 9 with rogues for our next subclass feature. But we get a new Cunning Strike option. So Cunning Strike means that whenever we are using our sneak attack, we can choose to deal less damage in order to proc an extra feature. So in this case, we deal 1d6 less damage on our sneak attack, in order to force the target to make a wisdom save, or they have the frightened condition. And while they're frightened, we have advantage on attack rolls against them. That's great. Frighten is already a great feature. That means the targets can't move closer to us, and they have disadvantage on all their stuff, so it's good to do against big targets. Also, it gives us advantage on attack rolls. Now, we can't take advantage of that until our next turn because rogues famously only get one attack, but it does stay on them for 1 minute, unless, of course, they manage to get the saving throw at the end of its turn. But I think that's definitely worth using on bigger targets for sure. The level 13 ability, I think, yeah, this is the one that uses the intelligence modifier. So now when using our teleport feature from level 3, we now deal damage to either the space we teleported from or the space we're teleporting to. But it's kind of a shitty amount of damage. It's just equal to our intelligence modifier, which, again, is probably like a 2. So you're dealing 2 damage to each creature, which could be and probably will be friendly creatures that you're teleporting to and from. That's not great, honestly. I think it's just not a really good ability. I mean, it's a neat idea, but the damage is so freaking low that I wonder why it's even there. Sorry, Rogue. Level 17, we gain an expended use of Bloodthirst when we finish a short rest. That's pretty nice because, again, we have a finite number according to our intelligence modifier. I would have rather had that at way early at level 13. And when you roll for sneak attack damage, you can treat a roll of 1 or 2 on the die as a 3. I don't know what that does to the math, but that's crazy that now we have a floor with how, like, you can't roll a certain, whatever I'm trying to say, but, like, you can't roll lower than a certain amount for your sneak attack. And I have no idea what it is at level 17. I didn't look that up, but that's actually a really cool feature that I wish other rogues had something similar to that. But I think that I wish both of these were earlier, and then this, or Malevolence, was something different. So as much as I like this rogue and I like the theming, I think it definitely falls off towards the end, which is why it ends up being at my number 4. Rogue Scion of the 3. Number 3 is the Bard. Where is the Bard? The College of the Moon, which is not anything to do with shapeshifting like the Druid Circle of the Moon. Instead, it has to do with the Moonshae Isles and their Moonwells and, like, Feywild stuff. Their level 3 ability is absolutely bonkers. When I saw this, I was like, holy crap. So, Moon's Inspiration, Inspired Eclipse, says that when you take a bonus action to give a creature a Bardic Inspiration die, which you're going to be doing quite a bit as a Bard, you have the invisible condition and teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see as part of that bonus action. So literally, for a Bard doing something that you're going to be doing quite a bit as a bonus action, not even as an action, you also get the invisible spell for level 2 and the Misty Step spell for level. Both of those are second level spells. So you're essentially casting both of them together as part of a bonus action for giving out Bardic Inspiration. That's insane. Now, granted, the invisibility only lasts for 1 round, but that's still crazy. It lasts until the start of your next turn. And then, of course, it ends if you're making attack rolls, deals damage, or cast spell. But holy crap! To be invisible and teleport away, that is the most vexing thing for a DM. So you are going to be able to avoid so much damage. That is incredible. Incredible. And also, that's not even the only feature you get. You also get Lunar Vitality, which says that when healing, whenever you're restoring HP, you can spend a Bardic Inspiration to increase the hit point amount by that amount of your Bardic Inspiration die. So you just are straight up a better healer if you want to spend the extra Bardic, which, you know, that scales. Your Bardic, again, scales from D6 to D8 to D10. You also increase their speed by 10 feet. That's crazy awesome. And if you needed more, you also get a cantrip from the Druid spell list and an extra skill for proficiencies. I'm already way on board with this. This is crazy powerful. So that's why it's my number 3. I do think it falls off, however, kind of similar to the Rogue as we get to the other abilities. Level 6 gets you the Moonbeam spell, aka the Orbital Laser Strike spell. You can also modify it. So whenever you cast it using your modification, you shed a little bit of light. And whenever a creature fails its save against Moonbeam, another creature regains 2d4 hit points. Kind of nice, but it doesn't really scale, and 2d4 hit points is really, really low. Moonbeam, by the way, is a 2nd level spell. I kind of would have just preferred if they had let us give us 1 Moonbeam spell for free without casting a spell slot or something else different, I guess. Like, I like the idea that it's, you know, we're the fucking moon bards, and so yeah, Moonbeam spell makes sense for that. But I didn't necessarily crazy about this feature just because the hit point amount was so low, and also they were really afraid of you using this too often. I guess, even though I don't think it's very powerful, you can only use that modification for Moonbeam once per long rest. I was like, all right, give me a break. That's not very exciting. And then the level 14 ability upgrades your third level features, which were already crazy. So now, whenever you give out your Bardic, you can still do your whole invisible Misty Step thing. Now the target who gets your Bardic can also get the invisible and Misty Step thing. Absolutely insanity. It's crazy. So that's very, very powerful. We do have to wait till level 14 to get it, though. So number 3, easy for this bard. I think it's just super powerful. It's cool themed with the whole moon stuff. I guess themed around like healing and like disappearing and light and all that. I think it works pretty well. And yeah, just thumbs up for the College of the Moon. But I think there are 2 that are a little bit more interesting to me. The number 2 is going to be the Fighter Banneret. I'm not familiar with that word, but it's a fighter who carries around a standard. And what I like about this is I'm like, yeah, we don't have this kind of martial fighter, which is a martial who's actually wants to be the leader or the face of the group. Originally, I was thinking this was like going to be like the 4E warlord or something, where it's like somebody who moves allies around, but it's really not. It's just somebody who is a supportive leader warrior, and it actually procs basically off your action surge and your second wind, which I like those kind of abilities, which just modify the abilities you've already got versus giving players more complexity. I also really like the out of combat level 3 nightly envoy feature, where you can learn a new language. You can also replace a language that you've learned after every long rest, which is very useful if you know you're going into, a certain area. You get into skill proficiency. You also can cast comprehend languages as a ritual, which is pretty awesome. So you instantly become very useful for out of combat, like talking to folks, because that happens a lot of times where everybody's like, hey, can anybody speak primordial in the party, or undercommon or something. Everybody's like, no, 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 no. And the fighter can be like, yeah, give me a second. Like, that's actually very useful. Group recovery means you can spend your second wind, and suddenly you can also heal your allies whenever you're healing yourself. It's not as good. It's 1d4 plus fighter level instead of 1d10, but still, your allies are going to be very helpful, or very happy to receive that help. They do have to be within 30 feet. You can also use it once per short rest, which again, you get more second wins in 2024. Remember, you get like 2 or 3, and then I think you actually get more as you level up your fighter, but you only get 1 back on a short rest. So you can just use the group recovery basically once per short rest as well. And then at level 7, whenever you use that group recovery, each ally also gets advantage on all their D20 tests until the start of your next turn. Really just awesome feature with doubling down on you being a leader of your group, and helping everybody, buffing everybody, giving them just really good buffs without taking away anything that you're already doing as a fighter, which is, activating your second winds and your action surge, which level 10 is the action surge modification. So now you grant nearby allies, whenever you use your action surge to get all your new actions, they then can use their reaction to either attack, so get a free attack, or they can move it to half their speed, basically getting disengage feature. Probably not used quite as often as you would think, because I think a lot of folks actually would want to hang on to their reactions. And I think the disengage actually might be the most useful way to use that reaction, because that does get people out of a jam. But like a lot of wizards would rather hang on to their shields or whatever else comes up. But also picture like your rogue friend who could get another sneak attack in, for example, right? Because you can only sneak attack once per turn, but not once per round. And a lot of rogues would love to be able to use their sneak attack as a reaction. That usually only comes up when they're doing attacks of opportunity if somebody moves away from them. But in this case, whenever the fighter uses action surge, they can use their reaction, just bam, nail somebody with a big old sneak attack. So that's a really great combo for them. The level 15 ability allows you to spend a reaction to use your Indomitable feature, which gives you a reroll of a failed save, to help an ally reroll their failed save, and they get a bonus equal to your fighter level. Guess what level you get this? Level freaking 15. So they get a plus 15. So more than likely, that's not quite legendary resistance, but basically giving them a, oh no, you're going to succeed on this, which is incredible. I love it. Again, very much you supporting your allies. And level 18, you don't get to fly, unlike many of the other ones. But it does up the radius of your group recovery rallying surge features to 60 feet instead of 30 feet, and you get immunity to charmed and frightened conditions. Not as exciting, I'll be honest, but I think it's so well designed It is a subclass that I have not seen yet and can't compare it to for any of the marshals, especially, which is a very supportive leadership subclass for the fighter. The theme where it ties into the Forgotten Realms specifically is a little bit less, but it just says, hey, like Knights of Cormyr or the Silver Marches or other lands across Faerun. Like, all right, fine, that's fine. But I just really like this subclass. I think it's really well designed for being a more supportive leadership fighter who's not necessarily just a paladin. So that only leaves my number one, which if you know what the classes and subclasses are, you already know what it is. But for me, my number one goes to a class that is many considers one of the most underrated, undercooked classes from D&D, and that is actually the Ranger Winter Walker. I think this one has such cool features, such a cool theme. I would love, actually, if that's how they do their Rangers, I say, like, you know what, for Ranger subclasses, you're tied to all of the individual biomes. I think that's cool, and that actually makes a lot of sense for a Ranger. Like, your whole thing is, you know this particular land really well, but you could either play that to type or against type. You'd be like, oh, we're doing an Icewind Dale campaign? Yeah, I'm going to play this Ranger Winter Walker and really know everything about it and be well suited for it. Or we're going to be in like this kind of coastal tropical jungle thing. All right, well, I'm going to be a fish out of water and hopefully I can, at least utilize some of my abilities here. But I think it's really nice the way the abilities are fun and make thematic sense. You deal extra cold damage. You also ignore resistance to cold damage, so you can always get that extra cold damage for your attacks. You also have resistance to cold damage. The whole theme is that you're a guy who's well accustomed to the winter biome, almost supernaturally, I think it says, regarded with equal parts respect and fear from the 10 towns area of Icewind Dale, which is cool. Hunter's Rhyme, whenever you cast Hunter's Mark, you gain temporary hit points equal to 1d10 plus your ranger level. That's as much as a second wind, I believe, which is cool, because guess what? We're casting Hunter's Mark quite a bit as a ranger with 2024, aren't we? And when a creature is marked by Hunter's Mark, it can't take the disengage action. This is such a good feature. Why is it not a baseline feature of all rangers? When all rangers cast Hunter's Mark, the target should not be able to take the disengage action. That's such an obvious thing. It sucks that, I mean, I'm glad it's here, but I read it and I was like, oh shit, that should be a baseline ranger feature. The new spells, of course, perfect. Ice Knife, Hold Person, Ice Storm. These are all fantastic, really thematic, makes sense. Fortifying Soul gives us actually a group heal akin to a fighter's second wind. Each creature regains hit points equal to 1d10 plus your ranger level. You do have to spend an action to do it, but that is a pretty decent amount of hit point if we roll pretty well, I guess. 1d10 plus 7. And we get advantage on saving throws to avoid or end the frightened condition for 1 hour. Also, we could use this out of combat. It's just you can use it once per long rest. So if for some reason you guys can't long rest, you can almost do it as like a Bard Song of Rest thing. That's just kind of a decent feature. Chilling Retribution gives us a reaction. This one is freaking huge. As a reaction, if you're getting hit, you can force a creature to make a wisdom save, and if they fail, they have the stunned condition for 1 round. That is insane. And actually, it's extra stunned because they're stunned and they can't move. Holy crap. Stunned is a huge condition, by the way, where I believe you have like advantage on them and they can't do anything. Like, it's just awesome. And the fact that you can do that as a reaction is incredible. You also gain a number of uses to it equal to your wisdom modifier, which is hopefully 2 or 3 as a ranger once per long rest. Really good to do on nasty creatures who are hitting you and you just stun them for a turn. Watch your DMs just jaw drop, basically. And it's until the end of your next turn. So it's for the rest of their turn, because they could have extra attack, so you could negate that, and then for a whole nother round until it's your turn again. That's awesome. Chilling Retribution. I think you have to yell freeze every time you do it. And level 15 gives you a Super Saiyan mode, and it's, of course, a cool ghostly snow form where you have immunity to cold damage. You emanate cold damage around you, and you become incorporeal, which means you are a ghost. You can literally fly through objects and creatures, and immunity to a bunch of conditions. Like, basically, the rules are written as if you were a ghost, and you can just move through everything. You could just turn this on and move through dungeon walls. Granted, it's level 15, so we have to take a while to get there, but that is awesome. Again, I think every one of these abilities is really cool. They're all really thematic. It just has to be my number one, which I was surprised because Ranger, usually not one we think of when we think of kind of the strongest classes, and I'm really impressed with this one. So there you go. That's my 1 through 8. So just to remind you, My number 1 is the Ranger Winter Walker. Let's go back to the subclass page. There we go. Or the whole Heroes of Faerun page. There we go. Number 1, Ranger Winter Walker. Number 2 is the Fighter Banneret. Number 3, the Bard College of the Moon. I wrote Circle of the Moon. Rogue Scion of the 3 at number 4. Number 5, Sorcerer Spellfire. Number 6, Wizard Bladesinger. Kind of interchangeable with those. Number 7, Paladin Oath of Noble Genies. And at the bottom of the list is the Cleric Knowledge Domain. That is my ranking. Thank you to everyone for watching this D&D video. You can watch more reviews and follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. You can support my work at patreon.com/RogueWatson and by using my affiliate link at Noble Knight Games. Also, thank you so much for the patrons for helping support this channel. Shout out to Platinum patrons Joe, Will, Thomas, Brandon, Genocider, Roleplay Roll, Christopher, Big Nut, John, Nathan, Andrew, Stephanie, Jason, Lubby Spuds, Wardy, MLC, Tom, the Eating the Dogs, Marcus, Hugo, Sasha, John, Jealous Guy, Zim, Jesse, Dante, how about Demnick, Sharney, Chris, and Robert, and Gold patrons RPG, Papercrafts, Pretty Boy, and Yuma, The Lizard Lounge, Jerome, Nathan, Scott, Refus, Jerry, Glenn, and Mark. Thank you all very much for your support.